Good morning and welcome to Detroit PBS's live coverage of the 2024 Mackinac Policy Conference. I am Zoe Clark, Political Director at Michigan Public, and I am thrilled to be back again this year, joining the One Detroit team live from Mackinac Island. This is our 14th year partnering with the Detroit Regional Chamber. The theme of the conference this year is Bridging the Future Together. Conversations are going to focus on attracting businesses and jobs, improving education outcomes to ensure workforce readiness, strengthening our infrastructure, and leading with innovation and equity. So let's get started. I am happy to welcome Zach Stanton, Deputy Editor of Playbook at POLITICO, Lauren Gibbons, Political Reporter at Bridge, Michigan, and Nancy Kaffer, Editorial Page Editor at the Detroit Free Press. Welcome, you three.
Thank you.
So good to have you here at the desk. Zach Stanton, yes. I have to start with you, mostly because you have traveled the farthest to get here. You are from Michigan originally, in D.C. with Politico. What brings you to the Mackinac Policy Conference?
Well, aside from general predilection towards masochism, I'm...
and all the fudge.
Yeah, and the fudge, yeah. There are so many political stories, and Michigan is the epicenter of so many of them this year.
Yeah.
You have the presidential race. Michigan is essential. It's a must-win state for Joe Biden. It's more or less a must-win state for Donald Trump as well. The U.S. Senate race that'll determine the majority in the chamber. You have two open House races that'll determine the majority in that chamber. And then when you look at the trends, whether it's with regards to a woman's right to choose, which is a pivotal issue in this election and was in the past election here in Michigan, Michigan tells us a lot about that. And it's going to tell us a lot about 2026 and about 2028. So I couldn't miss the opportunity to be here.
So, Lauren, that's sort of the scene from D.C. of Michigan. You, of course, are in Lansing, keeping an eye on the state legislature. Tell me about what you're thinking about vis-a-vis all things state politics up here at the conference this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also thinking about the federal races.
How can you not?
But I think a lot comes down to, here in Michigan, what happens in 2025 and beyond really comes down to who controls the state house. It's a huge race, or rather races, that will decide the House majority. And that's something that I've been thinking about. You know, it is a very, very close race, however you cut it. Democrats are really trying to hold or make gains on that two-seat majority, while Republicans really want the majority back, and they're fighting for it. You're seeing that in Oakland County. You're seeing that up north in Traverse City. There's several districts where it's close enough to be anyone's game, and I think that's something I'm really watching as we head into this election season.
Yeah. Nancy, from the Detroit Free Press, so you are keeping an eye on all things Detroit, the Metro Detroit region. What are you thinking and looking at while you're here at the conference this year?
Well, so a lot of what's going on here is about this year's elections,
yes.
And a lot of it's about what's going on in future years' elections, whether it's the 2025 mayoral race, the 2026 gubernatorial election, the 2028 presidential election even. It is, I'd say, the theme may not be elections, but the theme is elections and who's positioning and doing the things they need to do to be in place in those future cycles.
Yeah. So let's dig in a little bit to elections, but specifically democracy. The chamber, as often is the case before the conference, puts out a poll, sort of a wide-ranging, sometimes it's about the economy, infrastructure. This year, they asked specifically, though, a question about the state of our democracy. So this was a question among Michigan voters, somewhat eye-opening. So I want to read the exact number, and this was only 67% of respondents agreed that democracy is the best form of government, and only 49% strongly agree that democracy is the best form of government. Nancy, I got to ask, what do you make of these numbers?
It is really worrisome and depressing and shocking in a way that it really, I think, calls into question, the thing that defines America as a country. We have different races and ethnicities and countries of origin and people whose families have been here for one generation or 5 or 6 or 10 generations. But the thing that has always made us Americans together is our belief in democracy and this idea that this experiment that is the United States was the right thing to be doing and that we could work to form a more perfect union. And I realize I'm saying a lot of things that sound like hyperbole here, but it really is the soul of America. And for only 50% of people to say, slightly less than 50% of people to say that strongly agree that democracy is the best form of government, that should be just a huge alarm bell ringing. Now, I don't know what we do about that. I can't imagine anyone hearing that number and not being very alarmed and taking it seriously, but then where do you go from there, I think is a big question.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew. I would tell you if I knew.
Zach, I'm curious. So again, this is among Michigan voters, but I'd love your perspective nationally. When you talk to your reporters, right, who are covering things all across the country, was that number shocking to you, or is this what you see sort of nationally right now?
It's not altogether surprising to me. It's one of those numbers that is sort of shocking but not surprising. And I think one of the difficulties with it, and you see this in poll after poll, where people question whether democracy is the best form of government or question the validity of democracy, you see different sides meaning different things with the same answer. So I have a lot of Republicans who think that democracy is on the ballot in 2024. They mean a very different thing by that than what Democrats mean when they say democracy is on the ballot in 2024, where both sides seem to have an existential view of the stakes of this election. And if you're a Republican who has sort of followed Donald Trump down the rabbit hole of different election mistruths, then it's very easy to come to the conclusion that perhaps democracy isn't the best form of government because it's deprived us of Donald Trump. And the question, as Nancy alluded to, is how do you get back to some sort of common ground or even shared set of truths? And that's a vexing question that I think the media has yet to fully answer.
And I was fascinating, Lauren, by the fact that the chamber actually, with these results, sort of put out it's your job, folks who are at this conference, right? And it's not just politicians, it's business leaders, it's philanthropy, it's educators. You all need to be telling the story. It's not just lawmakers.
Right. It ultimately, the organizers of this conference are saying, it comes down to us to bridge this partisan divide, to make this something that we can work with and try to get through some of these problems. And it's a tough task to solve, right? If so many people are questioning the basic foundations of our society, where do we go from there? How do we bridge those gaps? I don't know that there's a great answer, but I guess we'll see if they make any progress, right?
So the problem with it being the responsibility of people at this conference to solve is that I'm going to guess 100% of people on this island right now believe that democracy is the best form of government. But the people who don't believe that are detached from traditional institutions. They don't feel represented in the government. They don't believe that the media tells them the truth. They're not listening to these institutional sources of information, which is a problem that's been growing since the George W. Bush presidency, when anonymous source we now know was Karl Rove told the New York Times Magazine that they were kind of done with the empirical reality-based community and would make their own reality, kind of expanded through the Trump administration. And then COVID, with all the conspiracy theories and disbelief about vaccines and what was happening, people have disengaged from traditional institutions that they used to trust for information. And I think if the folks in this hotel right now could fix this, I think they would. But the problem is the folks who need to hear about democracy, about institutions, aren't listening to institutions anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's the work of this group here. But as you note, it's got to go beyond just this island, beyond just the waters of this island. Okay, Nancy Kaffer with the Detroit Free Press, Lauren Gibbons with Bridge, Michigan, Zach Stanton with Politico. We are happy to have you on the island. Michigan getting some national love. Thank you so much for being here at the desk, and I'm looking forward to reading everything that all of you guys put out this week from the conference.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.